The starfall drifted through the empty space at the galaxy's edge like a metal whale swimming through an ocean of stars. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the scanner displays with tired eyes. He had been exploring the outer rim for 3 years now, mapping dead systems and empty worlds for the Galactic Confederation. Most days brought nothing but rock and gas and the cold silence of space. But today was different. "Commander," called Dr. Lisa Carter from her science station. Her voice carried a strange note that made Jake turn around. "You need to see this." Jake walked over to her console and looked at the readings. The numbers made no sense. According to the sensors, there was a small blue world orbiting a yellow star just ahead of them. That was not unusual. What was unusual was what the deep scans were showing. "Run it again," Jake said quietly. Lisa's fingers danced over her controls. The same impossible readings appeared on the screen. The planet was full of life. Not just simple life like bacteria or plants, but complex creatures, intelligent creatures. The energy signatures showed cities, vehicles, and technology. "This cannot be right," Jake muttered. He had studied the galactic maps his entire life. No intelligent species lived this far out on the rim. The Confederation had been exploring space for thousands of years. They knew where every advanced civilization was located. This sector was supposed to be empty. "I'm reading the scans correctly," Lisa said. She sounded as confused as Jake felt. "There is definitely a species down there. They call themselves humans." Jake stared at the blue world on his screen. It looked peaceful from this distance, with white clouds swirling over green and brown continents. But as he watched the data stream in, he began to understand why no one had expected to find intelligence here. The planet was a nightmare. Lisa pulled up the atmospheric readings and environmental data. The world's weather was completely unstable. Massive storms raged across the surface. The temperature swung from freezing cold to burning hot in different regions. The oceans were filled with predators that could swallow a shuttle whole. The land crawled with creatures that seemed designed to kill anything that moved. "Look at these seismic readings," Lisa said, pointing to another display. "The ground shakes constantly. Volcanoes explode without warning. The very rocks split open and swallow entire forests." Jake shook his head in disbelief. No intelligent species could survive on a world like that. The Confederation safety protocols would never allow colonization of such a place. But the evidence was right there in front of them. The humans were not just surviving on this death world. They were thriving. The energy readings showed millions of them living in huge cities. They had built machines that flew through their poisonous atmosphere and sailed across their deadly oceans. Somehow, against all logic and reason, they had made this hostile world their home. "Commander," came another voice from across the bridge. Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez was manning the communication station. "I am picking up their transmissions. They are broadcasting signals into space." "Put it on the speakers," Jake ordered. The bridge filled with strange sounds. Music with complex rhythms and melodies. Voices speaking in dozens of different languages. Stories and news and conversations about things the crew could not understand. But underneath it all was something that made Jake's skin crawl with unease. These humans sounded happy. They were living on a world that would kill most species within days. And they were singing songs about love and hope and dreams. They told jokes and laughed at things that should have terrified them. They talked about their plans for tomorrow as if they were certain there would be a tomorrow. "Run a biological scan on the species," Jake commanded. Lisa's fingers flew over her controls again. When the results came back, the bridge fell silent. Every member of the crew stared at the impossible data. The humans were weak. Weaker than anything the Confederation had ever encountered. They had no natural armor to protect them from their world's dangers. Their skin was thin and soft and easily damaged. Their bones broke under pressure that other species would barely notice. They could not breathe underwater, could not see in the dark, and could not heal quickly from injuries. Most shocking of all, they only lived for about 100 of their planet's years. In galactic terms, their lives were shorter than a single season. They were born, grew up, grew old, and died all in the space of time that most Confederation citizens considered a brief vacation. "How is this possible?" whispered Dr. Amy Johnson, the ship's cultural specialist. She had been studying alien civilizations for 2 centuries. Species this fragile should have gone extinct millions of years ago. Jake stared at the blue world and tried to understand what he was seeing. According to everything the Confederation knew about evolution and survival, these humans should not exist. Their world should have killed them long before they learned to make fire, yet here they were, not only alive but apparently happy about it. "Commander," Ben said from his station, "I am detecting something else. The humans are not alone on their world." More data streamed across the screens. The planet was full of other creatures, massive beasts with teeth like swords and claws like spears, flying creatures that could snatch prey from great heights, tiny creatures that carried diseases deadly enough to wipe out entire populations. But the humans had not just survived alongside these monsters. They had tamed many of them. The scans showed creatures that once hunted humans now living peacefully in human cities. Some of the greatest predators on the planet were now helping the humans hunt other creatures. They turned their enemies into friends, Lisa said in wonder. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of exploration, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans were rewriting every rule the galaxy thought it knew about survival. "Set course for the edge of their solar system," he ordered. "We need to observe them more closely." As the starfall moved toward the human world, Jake could not shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The Confederation had spent millennia believing that strength came from natural gifts, long life, and advanced technology. These humans seemed to prove that everything the galaxy thought it knew was wrong. What kind of species could look at a world trying to kill them and decide to make it home? What kind of creatures could face death every day and still find reasons to sing? Jake was about to find out, and he suspected the answer would shake the foundations of everything the galaxy believed about life itself. Captain Roy Bennett stood in the conference room of the monitoring station they had built on the dark side of the human moon. Through the thick windows he could see the blue and green world that had turned everything upside down. 3 months of watching the humans had only made the mystery deeper. "The morning report, sir," said Ambassador Karen White, placing a datapad on the metal table. Her usually calm face showed signs of stress. "The observation teams are having trouble processing what they are seeing." Roy picked up the pad and scrolled through the latest findings. Each report was more impossible than the last. The humans were doing things that violated every known principle of species behavior. Yesterday, Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez had recorded a group of humans climbing a mountain during a blizzard. The temperature was cold enough to freeze most known species solid, and the wind was strong enough to tear apart unprotected flesh. The humans were wearing only thin coverings and carrying simple tools. They should have died within hours. Instead, they reached the top. "Why?" Roy asked, looking up from the report. "Why did they risk their lives to climb that mountain? There was nothing up there. No resources, no strategic advantage, no scientific value. They climbed it because it was there." Karen nodded grimly. "Dr. Amy Johnson thinks it has something to do with their short lifespans. She believes they feel compelled to experience everything they can before they die. But that explanation did not cover everything they had observed. 2 weeks ago, the monitoring team had watched a human jump into a raging river to save a complete stranger. The human had never met the person before and would probably never see them again. Yet he risked his life without hesitation. The stranger was not even the same type of human. The teams had learned that humans came in different colors and spoke different languages. Many human groups had fought wars against each other throughout their history. Yet when one was in danger, others would risk everything to help, regardless of what group they belonged to. "The rescue behavior is the most disturbing pattern," Roy said, flipping through more reports. "In the past month, we have recorded 47 cases of humans endangering themselves to help others. Sometimes they help their own kind. Sometimes they help the other creatures on their planet. Yesterday, a human female risked her life to save a small animal from a burning building." Karen pulled up a video file on the wall screen. It showed a human woman running into a structure that was being consumed by flames. The fire was hot enough to melt metal, and poisonous smoke filled the air. The woman covered her face with a wet cloth and crawled through the danger. She emerged minutes later carrying a tiny creature that most species would consider food. The animal was not intelligent, had no special abilities, and was too small to be useful for work. Yet the human had risked her life to save it. "She nearly died for that creature," Roy said quietly, and when the news services interviewed her later, she said she would do it again. The conference room door opened and Dr. Lisa Carter walked in, carrying an armful of biological analysis reports. She looked exhausted. The science team had been working around the clock, trying to understand how the humans functioned. "The latest medical scans confirm our worst fears," Lisa said, dropping the reports on the table. These humans are even more fragile than we thought. Roy looked at the data and felt his stomach turn. Human bones were hollow and brittle compared to most species. Their muscles were weak and their skin provided almost no protection. They could die from exposure to temperatures that other creatures found comfortable. They could drown in their own atmosphere if certain gases were introduced. Most horrifying of all, their bodies constantly attacked themselves. They suffered from diseases that their own biological systems created. Their hearts simply stopped working for no reason. Their minds could break down and stop functioning properly. They were literally dying from the moment they were born. How long do the medical experts think they have? Roy asked, as a species. Lisa shook her head. They should have gone extinct before they learned to make tools. Every model we run shows them dying out within a few generations. Yet they have been thriving on that death world for thousands of years. Karen activated another screen showing human cities from orbit. The settlements were massive, housing millions of individuals each. The humans had covered their entire planet with roads, buildings, and machines. They had even begun sending small ships into space around their world. Look at this, Karen said, zooming in on one of the cities. They build their homes right next to active volcanoes. They construct their ports on coastlines that are regularly hit by massive storms. They farm crops in areas that flood every year. Roy studied the images. Other species would have avoided these dangerous areas completely. They would have found safe locations far from natural threats. But the humans seem to build their civilizations in the most dangerous places possible. Maybe they do not understand the risks, Roy suggested. Lisa pulled up another file. Actually, they understand perfectly. We intercepted their educational broadcasts. They teach their young about all the dangers on their world. They have detailed scientific studies of every threat they face. They know exactly how dangerous everything is. Then why do they stay? Roy asked. Because they refuse to let danger control their choices, came a voice from the doorway. Dr. Amy Johnson walked into the room. Carrying a cup of the bitter drink the monitoring team had taken to consuming. I have been studying their cultural transmissions. They have a saying, home is where the heart is. They have made that deadly world their home and they will not abandon it. Roy turned back to the window and looked down at the blue planet. Somewhere down there, millions of humans were waking up to face another day on a world that was trying to kill them. They would go to work, care for their families, create art and music, and plan for the future. They would do all of this knowing that they might not live to see tomorrow. We need to make contact, Roy said finally. The Confederation needs to know what we have found here. Karen looked worried. Sir, first contact protocols require extensive preparation. We need to study their languages, understand their culture, and develop communication methods. That could take years. We do not have years, Roy replied. He had been reading the reports from Confederation space. Other exploration ships were beginning to detect strange energy signatures in nearby sectors. Word of something unusual happening on the galactic rim was starting to spread. The humans are already reaching toward the stars, Roy continued, pointing to the small ships orbiting the planet. In a few decades, maybe less, they are going to develop faster than light travel. When they do, they are going to spread across the galaxy whether we are ready or not. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. A species that refused to be stopped by the deadliest world in known space would not be stopped by the vacuum of space either. Choose a small team, Roy ordered. Make contact with a limited group of humans. We need to understand what drives them before word of their existence reaches the Confederation Council. As his staff began making preparations, Roy continued staring down at the human world. Something told him that once the galaxy learned about these impossible creatures, nothing would ever be the same again. The first meeting took place in a small building made of wood and stone in what the humans called Colorado. Dr. Helen Parker sat across from Ambassador Karen White at a simple table, while Colonel Sam Davis stood near the door with his hand resting on his weapon. The humans had been surprisingly calm when the alien ship had landed in the remote mountain valley. So you have been watching us, Helen said, pouring hot liquid from a metal container into small cups. She offered one to Karen, who accepted it cautiously. For how long? 6 months, Karen replied, testing the drink. It was bitter but warming. We needed to understand your species before making contact. Sam shifted his weight by the door. He was a large human male with scars on his face and hands. Karen's briefings had identified him as a professional warrior, trained to fight and kill. Yet he had not drawn his weapon when the aliens revealed themselves. He simply watched and waited. Understand us how? Helen asked. She was smaller than Sam, but carried herself with quiet confidence. The reports indicated she was a scientist who studied the stars. What did you learn? Karen had prepared for this question, but now that she faced the humans directly, the words seemed inadequate. How could she explain that their entire existence was impossible? We learned that you should not exist, Karen said finally. Helen laughed, a sound that the translators converted into something resembling musical notes. That is what my husband says every morning when I drink coffee before I'm fully awake. The casual response confused Karen. She had expected fear, anger, or at least surprise. Instead, the human woman seemed amused. You do not understand, Karen continued. Your species survives on a world that should have killed you millions of years ago. You live for such a short time that most civilizations would consider you already dead, yet you have built a thriving society and are reaching toward the stars. Is that unusual? Sam asked from his position by the door. Karen turned to look at him. Colonel Davis, the average lifespan in the Galactic Confederation is between 500 and 3,000 years. Most species live on worlds with stable climates and few natural threats. They develop slowly and carefully, avoiding unnecessary risks. Sounds boring, Helen said, taking a sip of her coffee. It is safe, Karen replied. Safety allows for long-term planning and steady progress. Your species faces constant danger and has no time for careful development. Logic suggests you should still be hiding in caves. Helen stood up and walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling on the mountain peaks. The temperature was well below freezing, and the wind was strong enough to knock down trees. For Karen's species, such conditions would require protective suits and emergency shelters. Helen opened the window and took a deep breath of the cold air. My grandmother used to say that we do not get to choose when we are born or when we die, Helen said, closing the window. We only get to choose what we do with the time between. She returned to the table and sat down. Your species lives for thousands of years. That is wonderful for you. But tell me, Ambassador White, what have you done with all that time? The question caught Karen off guard. In her 800 years of life, she had studied 17 different sciences, mastered 4 art forms, and traveled to over 200 worlds. By Confederation standards, she was considered quite accomplished. I have gained knowledge and experience, Karen answered. But have you made a difference? Helen asked gently. Have you changed anything? Have you made the galaxy better than it was when you were born? Karen thought about it. She had written papers that other scholars read. She had helped negotiate trade agreements between distant worlds. She had cataloged the customs of dozens of species. But when she died, would the galaxy be any different because she had lived? We have time to consider our actions carefully, Karen said. We do not need to rush, Sam spoke from the doorway. Ma'am, with respect, maybe that is the problem. Karen turned to face him. Explain. When you know you have forever, it is easy to put things off until tomorrow, Sam said. When you know you might not see next week, every day matters. Every choice matters. Every moment is precious because you cannot get it back. Helen nodded in agreement. We learned early that the universe does not care about our plans. Storms destroy our cities. Earthquakes swallow our buildings. Diseases kill our children. We could spend our whole lives hiding from these dangers. Or we can accept them and live anyway. She pulled up images on a small device and showed them to Karen. The pictures showed human cities rebuilt after massive destruction, farms replanted after floods, families celebrating even while surrounded by the ruins of their homes. We call it resilience, Helen explained. The ability to bend without breaking, to get knocked down and get back up, to lose everything and start over with a smile. Karen studied the images. In several of them, humans were helping other humans rebuild, strangers working side by side to repair damage they had not caused. Children playing in the rubble while adults cleared away debris. Why do you help each other? Karen asked. Competition for resources should make you fight, not cooperate. Because we are all in this together, Sam said simply. The storm that destroys my house today might destroy yours tomorrow. The disease that kills my family could kill yours next year. We survive as a species by taking care of each other. Helen activated another image. This one showed humans working to save other creatures from a flood. They were risking their lives to rescue animals that could not help them in return. We share this world with thousands of other species, Helen said. Many of them are stronger than us, faster than us, or better adapted to survive. But we are the only ones who can choose to protect the others. Karen stared at the image. The humans in the picture were up to their waists in dangerous water, carrying creatures to safety. Some of the animals they saved were predators that might hunt humans under different circumstances. You save your enemies, Karen said in disbelief. We save everything we can, Helen corrected. Today's enemy might be tomorrow's friend, and even if they remain enemies, they still deserve to live. The concept was so foreign to Karen that she struggled to process it. Every other species in the galaxy followed the same basic principle. Protect your own kind first, then worry about others if there was time and resources left over. The idea of risking your life for creatures that might kill you seemed like madness. There is something else you need to understand about us, Sam said, moving away from the door to sit at the table. We do not just adapt to our environment. We change it. Helen smiled and activated more images on her device. These showed massive human engineering projects. Dams that controlled flooding rivers, bridges that spanned deadly canyons, cities built on platforms over swampy ground. When the world gives us problems, we find solutions, Helen explained. When nature tries to stop us, we find ways around the obstacles. We do not just survive in our environment, we make it work for us. Karen looked at the images with growing amazement. The humans had not just learned to live on their hostile world. They had tamed it. They had turned disasters into opportunities and obstacles into advantages. This is why we are going to the stars, Helen continued. Not because our world is not enough for us, but because we believe we can make other worlds better too. We want to share what we have learned about surviving impossible odds. As Karen listened to the humans explain their philosophy, she began to understand why their discovery would terrify the Confederation. These creatures did not just challenge the galaxy's assumptions about survival and evolution. They challenged the very idea of limitations. The humans had looked at a universe that seemed designed to kill them and decided to make it their home anyway. They had turned weakness into strength, brevity into urgency, and danger into opportunity. They had proven that with enough determination and cooperation, any obstacle could be overcome. And now they were reaching toward the stars with the same impossible confidence that had let them conquer their death world. Karen realized that the galaxy was about to learn what it meant when humans refused to accept that something could not be done. The Confederation Council chamber had never been this quiet. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood at the center of the Great Hall, surrounded by representatives from 47 different species. Her report about humanity lay open on every desk, but most of the council members were staring at her in stunned silence. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, said Councillor Zenth of the Arcarian Empire. His forearms gestured nervously as he spoke. You found a species that lives for less than a century, has no natural defenses, and chooses to live on a world that actively tries to kill them. And you believe this makes them significant? Kate nodded calmly. More than significant, Counselor. They represent a fundamental challenge to everything we believe about survival and evolution. The massive Vorthak representative, a crystalline being that had lived for over 2 millennia, made a sound like grinding glass. Admiral Sullivan, with respect, we have encountered hundreds of short-lived species. Most of them die out within a few thousand years. Why should these humans be any different? Kate activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images of human achievements appeared in the air above the council members. Cities that housed millions, machines that could fly through space, art and music that moved listeners to tears. Because they accomplished all of this in less time than most of our species take to plan a single construction project, Kate replied. They went from discovering fire to splitting atoms in just a few thousand years. They mapped their own genetic structure before they learned to travel between stars. They are developing at a rate that should be impossible. Councillor Vex of the Hegemony flicked his tail dismissively. His reptilian features showed skepticism. Rapid development often leads to rapid extinction. These humans will probably destroy themselves before they become a real factor in galactic affairs. That is what we thought too, Kate said grimly. But Dr. Paul Griffin's analysis suggests otherwise. She brought up new data that made several council members gasp. The information showed human population growth, technological advancement, and territorial expansion over the past 1,000 years. Instead of the boom and bust cycle that most species experienced, the human trajectory showed steady, sustained growth. They learn from their mistakes, Kate explained. When they develop a dangerous technology, they create safeguards. When they face extinction-level threats, they work together to overcome them. They have survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and global wars. Each disaster makes them stronger. The council chamber erupted in concerned whispers. Counselor Yira of the Peaceful Worlds raised her hand for silence. Her species had evolved past violence millennia ago and spoke in harmony with each other. Admiral, are you suggesting that these humans are a threat to galactic peace? Yira asked in her melodic voice. Kate paused before answering. This was the question she had been dreading. I am suggesting that they represent a threat to galactic stagnation, she said carefully. For 10,000 years, the Confederation has maintained stability through careful planning, risk avoidance, and gradual progress. The humans prove that a different approach is possible. Commander Alex Turner stepped forward. From his position behind Kate, he had been part of the observation team and had seen the humans, firsthand, council members. We have recorded humans regularly risking their lives for strangers. They sacrifice their own resources to help other species on their world. They work together across cultural and physical differences that would have started wars among most civilizations. He activated a new set of images showing human rescue operations, charitable organizations, and cooperative projects. They do not just survive, Alex continued. They actively try to make their world better for everyone who lives on it. And now they are preparing to bring that same attitude to the stars. The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. Finally, Elder Thros of the ancient Dominion rose from his seat. He was old even by Confederation standards, having lived for over 3,000 years. This is precisely why they must be contained, Thros said in his deep, resonant voice. The humans represent chaos. They glorify risk-taking and rapid change. If other species begin to copy their behavior, it could destabilize our entire civilization. Murmurs of agreement rippled through some sections of the chamber. The older, more established species nodded their heads. They had built their power on careful planning and risk avoidance. The human approach threatened everything they had worked to achieve, but other voices began to rise in disagreement. Counselor Neve of the Young Worlds stood up, her blue skin glowing with excitement. Elder Thros, perhaps chaos is exactly what we need, she said boldly. When was the last time our species truly innovated? When did we last solve a problem instead of just managing it? These humans might show us how to grow again. The chamber divided into heated discussions. Representatives of younger civilizations seemed intrigued by the human example. They talked excitedly about the possibilities of rapid advancement and bold exploration. But the older species looked horrified at the idea of abandoning their careful, controlled approach to development. Kate watched the debates with growing concern. She had expected controversy, but she had not anticipated how quickly the council would split into opposing camps. Council members, she said loudly, calling for attention. There is one more thing you need to know about the humans. The chamber quieted down as everyone turned back to her. They are not content to stay on their world, Kate continued. Our analysis indicates they will achieve faster-than-light travel within the next 50 years. When they do, they will begin expanding across the galaxy whether we approve or not. Elder Thros's face darkened. Then we must act quickly to prevent their expansion. You mean destroy them, said Counselor Neve, her glow shifting to angry red. I mean protect galactic stability, Thros replied coldly. One species cannot be allowed to threaten the peace we have maintained for millennia. The chamber erupted into shouting as species took sides. The older civilizations supported containment or elimination of the human threat. The younger ones demanded that humans be allowed to develop naturally and join the galactic community. Kate realized that her report had done more than inform the Council about humanity's existence. It had exposed the deep divisions within Confederation society itself. Species that had grown comfortable and safe were now faced with beings who challenged their entire worldview. Dr. Mary Clark, who had been part of the original observation team, stepped up to the speaking platform. Council members, we are missing the point, she said, her voice cutting through the arguing. The question is not whether humanity threatens our way of life. The question is whether our way of life is worth preserving, if it means we never grow or change or become better than we are. Her words created a moment of silence in the great chamber. The humans are not trying to conquer anyone, Mary continued. They are trying to survive and help others survive too. They are trying to solve problems and explore possibilities. They are trying to make tomorrow better than today. If that threatens us, then maybe we are the ones who need to change. As Mary spoke, Kate looked around the chamber and saw something that chilled her to the bone. The faces of the council members showed fear, not fear of human weapons or technology or territorial ambitions. They feared what humans represented, the possibility that there was a better way to live. The debate that followed would last for weeks and divide the Confederation more deeply than any previous crisis. But Kate already knew how it would end. The older species would never accept the human challenge to their careful, controlled existence. They would demand action to preserve their way of life, and that would mean war. A war that would indeed burn the heavens and change the galaxy forever. Kate only hoped that when the flames died down, something better would emerge from the ashes. The war began not with weapons, but with words. Dr. Mary Clark sat in the communications center of the Lunar Monitoring Station, staring at the message she had just received from Confederation space. The ancient Dominion had issued an ultimatum. Humanity would submit to genetic modification and relocation to a controlled world, or they would be eliminated as a threat to galactic stability. The deadline was 7 days. "They cannot be serious," said Commander Alex Turner, reading over her shoulder. "The Confederation has never destroyed an entire species. It goes against everything they claim to believe in." Mary looked up at him with sad eyes. That was before they encountered humans. "We have made them question everything they believe about civilization. Some beings cannot handle that kind of challenge to their worldview." On the screens around them, they could see human cities continuing their normal activities. People went to work, children played in parks, and families gathered for meals. The humans had been informed about the alien ultimatum, but their response had been typically human. They refused to submit. The human leaders had sent a simple message: back to the Confederation. We have faced extinction before. We choose to face it as free beings rather than live as prisoners. Mary felt tears running down her face as she watched the humans prepare for what might be their final week of existence. Instead of panicking or fighting among themselves, they were doing something that defied all logic. They were helping each other get ready. Emergency shelters were being built in every city. Food and medical supplies were being distributed to anyone who needed them. Parents were recording messages for their children, and children were drawing pictures for their parents. Scientists were uploading all of human knowledge to hidden data storage systems, hoping that something of their civilization might survive. But most remarkably, they were still going about their daily lives. Schools remained open. Hospitals continued caring for patients. Artists kept creating new works. Musicians performed concerts in the parks. "How can they be so calm?" Alex asked, watching a group of children playing in a schoolyard. "They know the most powerful military force in the galaxy is coming to destroy them." Mary smiled through her tears. "Because being afraid would not change anything. They have always known their time was limited. Now they know exactly how limited it might be. So they are making sure every moment counts." The communication system chimed with an incoming message. Mary opened it and gasped. The transmission was coming from dozens of different worlds throughout Confederation space. "This is Captain Ryan Foster of the Terran Defense Initiative," came a voice over the speakers. "Is anyone out there listening?" Mary activated the response system. "This is Dr. Mary Clark at Luna Station. Captain Foster, how are you transmitting across interstellar distances? Humans do not have that technology yet." "We do now," Ryan replied with a grim chuckle. "Funny how fast you can develop new technology when your species is about to be wiped out. We have been in contact with some friends in the Confederation." On the screens, new data began streaming in. Ships from younger Confederation species were moving toward human space. Not to attack, but to defend. The revelation about humanity had split the galaxy just as it had split the Council. Hundreds of worlds had declared that they would not stand by and watch genocide. "The peaceful worlds have pledged their defensive fleet," Ryan continued. "The Young Worlds Coalition is sending everything they have. Even some of the older species are having second thoughts about this war." Mary felt hope rising in her chest. "How many ships?" "About 3,000 vessels from 41 different worlds," Ryan answered. "It is not enough to match the ancient Dominion's fleet, but it might be enough to give humanity a fighting chance." As Mary listened to the reports coming in from across the galaxy, she began to understand what was really happening. The discovery of humanity had not just revealed a new species to the galaxy. It had revealed what the galaxy could become if it chose to embrace change instead of fearing it. Species that had stagnated for millennia were suddenly inspired to act. Beings who had never taken risks were willing to gamble their entire civilizations on the idea that humanity represented hope for the future. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not fought just in space, but in the hearts and minds of billions of beings across thousands of worlds. On one side stood the ancient Dominion and its allies, defending their vision of careful, controlled civilization. They commanded the most powerful fleets and the most advanced weapons. They had experience and resources and time on their side. On the other side stood humanity and their unexpected allies, fighting for the right to grow and change and become something better. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something their enemies did not understand. They had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. The first battle took place at the edge of human space near the planet Jupiter. Admiral Kate Sullivan, who had switched sides and joined the human defense fleet, watched as the ancient Dominion's massive warships emerged from hyperspace. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," she broadcast to the mixed fleet of human and alien vessels. "Remember, we are not just fighting for humanity today. We are fighting for the right of every species to choose its own destiny." The battle was fierce and terrible. Ships burned like new stars against the darkness of space. Beings who had never seen combat fought alongside humans who treated war as just another problem to solve. But as the fighting continued, something remarkable happened. The ancient Dominion's own forces began to defect. Younger crew members on the older ships started to question why they were destroying people who had never threatened anyone. They saw humans willing to die for complete strangers and began to wonder if maybe there was a better way to live. The war lasted 3 years and spread across dozens of star systems. When it finally ended, the galaxy was transformed. The ancient Dominion had fallen apart, its member species choosing to pursue their own paths of development. The Confederation had been reformed with new principles based on freedom, growth, and cooperation. And at the center of it all were the humans, no longer alone at the galaxy's edge. Mary Clark, now much older, stood in the council chamber of the new Galactic Alliance. She watched as human representatives worked alongside beings from hundreds of different worlds, all united by the revolutionary idea that life was meant to be lived fully, not just safely. The humans had kept their promise. They had shared what they learned about surviving impossible odds. They had shown the galaxy that any limitation could be overcome with enough determination and cooperation. The revelation had indeed burned the heavens. But from those flames had emerged something new and beautiful. A galaxy where every being was free to reach for the stars and become more than they had ever dreamed possible. And it had all started with a small blue world at the galaxy's edge, where creatures too weak to survive had refused to give up and too stubborn to accept that anything was truly impossible. The age of careful stagnation was over. The age of bold exploration had begun, and the humans, as always, were leading the way into the unknown with smiles on their faces and hope in their hearts.